I'm a Final Fantasy XIV player, and I decided to abandon that game and play a superior MMO, World of Warcraft. And after you're done typing all your hate comments and how I betrayed the game I loved, please sub to the channel and hit the bell icon just so you can keep up with all my WoW adventures as you hate type my videos into oblivion. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Hi, I'm Sinkweaver, and as I said before, I'm a Final Fantasy XIV player, which means I'm what most WoW vets call a weeb. And so, to understand why grown adults that had played a video game for over a decade keep calling us weebs while standing on their "our game's better" hill, I decided to explore this now, holy crap, it's 17 years old? This game is 17 years old. It's 17 years old. Slightly aged MMO and started a free account into the world of Azeroth. Oh, and just so you guys know, I'm not giving up on 14. As far as you guys know, I just wanted to know why so many people love this game so much since the early 2000s. The only way to get the facts on that is to dive right in, ignoring all the stigma both sides may have. I'm going into this with the full expectation of Blizzard eventually taking my money, because there's no way I'm not subbing to one of the greatest MMOs of all time. Supposedly. So, the first thing I obviously had to do was make a character. Now, I was gonna go for Horde since I thought the werewolf character looking pretty feral was obviously in the Horde, right? No, it wasn't. In fact, the wolf, or Worgen, are part of the Alliance, and the cow person, or Tauren, are part of the Horde, which I thought was actually in the Alliance. So I guess I was choosing the Alliance, and I guess I'm going with Worgen. That is until I saw something interesting. Fate would lead me to the Draenei, otherworldly beings that were related to one of the game's biggest baddies. So instead of picking the obviously best race in the game, I chose to be this freaky blue guy instead. Also, they were paladins. Good choice. So, to be honest, I made this character almost a year ago when I first thought about playing World of Warcraft. I played the character for a solid hour before getting bored and leaving it for dead. Sometime later, I keep hearing about how Activision Blizzard were basically killing themselves on the inside with horrible business practices. This led the WoW community to basically complain about certain things that were deemed bad in terms of WoW content, even though the game was in the middle of its new expansion, Shadowlands. Funny enough, not only was WoW still not on their first patch after almost 6 months, but they seem to be pissing off their players with each decision they make. I mean, I have to give it to J. Allen Brack. The dude has to take it up the ass by both the players and his CEO overlords, and he still has some color in his hair. Exhibit A? Exhibit B. Being the curious little tyke that I am, I decided to ignore the stigma the Final Fantasy XIV community usually has for WoW and tried the game again, this time ignoring the wall of text I'm sure to be hit with every time I start and end a quest. Well, at least I try. You guys already know I'm a lore buff, so I'm going to read the text eventually. So a lot of the lore in World of Warcraft is somewhat ignored by most players. Well, that was until I met this lonely dude on the island full of owl people, and trust me, we'll get to that in a little bit. As I started walking my way to my next quest location, I realized real quick just how big the game was. Compared to 14, World of Warcraft had a huge setting for the players to explore. For my little Draenei, the world was a huge buffet waiting to be engorged. However, there was one thing stopping me from truly exploring. Well, two things really. The scattered locations of the quest, which didn't really show me how to get to their location sometimes, and the enemies of which kept targeting me no matter how high my level was. I couldn't even sneak behind them like I do in Final Fantasy XIV and Final Fantasy XI, which is an older game. Well, I didn't let that stop me from exploring, and I eventually made it to this red as blood, crimson as fuck island where I would spend much of my time as Draenei from around level 8 or so to level goddamn 20. Now, from what I can understand from my 5 hours of being on this red as hell island, the Draenei are here to investigate the place due to the corruption that seems to be spreading. This corruption, however, does not seem to be all natural, seeing how there are engine parts from the ship the Draenei were on, the whole of Draenei by the way, which crash landed on this island while escaping to Azeroth. There's this whole story of how the Draenei were actually runaways from their old home world due to some guy named Kill Jaden, which if that wasn't a setup for bad guy name of the year, then I don't know what is. Apparently the ship was sabotaged by blood elves who were stowaways in the engine room, a place where I would think you'd first secure, but you know, what the hell do I know? I'm not a ship hand. It seemed that the engine had broken apart and helped infect the island, I think. Not really sure, but I did beat up this big lady though. though she is not a replacement for Lady D. The quests, I should add, had some good stories to them, like this Colin guy who I talked about before. Apparently his whole family was eaten by these owl things, and he wanted us to go pick some of them off to see which one ate his family and give the half-digested remains back to him. I succeeded, of course, but there was no closure for me when I finished this quest, nor for Colin, who only wanted the remains so that he could bury them somewhere else. Weird enough, he stayed in the same spot sulking when I gave him his family's remains, and even odder was that at some point when all said and done for the island, well, all the important stuff that is, Colin is seen dancing like he had just won a car from Oprah. I don't even have the words to convey my confusion here. Colin, are you dancing because you have nothing left? Are you trying to convey with your movements that you need help? Do you want me to end it for you? Just say the word, man. I'm pretty much a murder hobo. I'm always thinking about you. I then found myself cleaning up all the quests that I could find, from treasure maps to killing flowers, from fetch quests to killing bears, from finding dead survey teams to killing nagas, to killing goatmen, blood elves, dragon hatchlings, lost spirits, bigger dragons, more nagas, and even walking trees. Did I mention that you kill a lot of things? Yeah, you kill a lot of people in this game, not just monsters. No wonder people come down and say that you're just another murder hobo for hire. I'm a very easy person to impress when it comes to MMOs. I mean, even after I played Final Fantasy XI and moving on to Final Fantasy XIV 1.0, which was a massive disappointment, I've played RuneScape, EverQuest, Guild Wars, The Old Republic, Rift, Aeon, MapleStory, Latale, Guild Wars 2, WildStar, DC Universe Online, The Matrix Online, Phantasy Star Online, Phantasy Star Online Universe, MapleStory 2, Phantasy Star Online 2, Elder Scrolls Online for like an hour, Fly for Fun, Toontown, Mabinogi Heroes, Terra Online, Blade and Soul, that one Shin Megami Tenshin MMO that nobody remembers, insert generic Korean MMO here, in a dump truck more. Believe me, I've played a lot. What I'm trying to say is that whatever gameplay was coming my way, it would not deter me from actually trying to play the game. I mean, we're not moving very far from gameplay differences here. Final Fantasy XIV is a tab and target MMO that uses basic target combat that most MMOs uses to this day, and WoW uses the same exact thing, but with subtle differences. Where 14 likes to have a lot to do with fancy animations to show the damage that you're inflicting on your target, WoW does the same, but snappier and less flashier. The immediate response of WoW's combat was a bit jarring at first, and that's because I got used to the combat that usually has startup or drop-off animations that is in Final Fantasy XIV. Not saying that either is bad, it would be like judging toasters that both did the job and got it done, but one was exactly 1 second faster than the other, and the exact result was the same for the second toaster. It doesn't matter which toaster I use as long as I get my waffle. I need it for chicken. I went to Paladin, just as I did in Final Fantasy XIV 1.0, and continued on to 2.0. And where the Paladin in 14 felt like a hero with a sword, I had been using mostly Retribution Paladin and WoW, which feels like a knight on a mission since they use more than just a sword and a shield. They use great swords and maces. They also had more than one healing spell. Just saying. Retribution being the spec I used in most of my time in WoW. Now, 14 does not have specs, or talent trees, or anything that would be considered a difference in choice within the job system. But they do have multiple jobs. You can have multiple jobs on one character in Final Fantasy XIV, and some people have even told me that's like changing up a character in a fighting game, which I don't know if that makes a difference here. But at the very least, instead of being able to have a unique class, you can just be really good with one job in Final Fantasy XIV if you really wanted to. But when someone picks Paladin, and the only thing that makes you any different from the other Paladins in the world is your gear and the materia that's locked onto your gear, which helps raise your stat just a little bit, it all comes down to your skills. And trust me, 14 has your number when it comes to combat and your skills. You gotta know that rotation. From what I figure, since I'm not at endgame yet with World of Warcraft, I assume they have the same thing going on, but with more variations on the classes like the specs, talents, bonus enchantments on gear, and gem sockets that seem to be similar to how materia work, but with enchantments instead of direct stats. Mind you, if I'm wrong, it's because I'm not at that point in the game, so give me a break, you frantic WoW player who was just about to leave a short story explanation on how I'm wrong about everything. Movement was also something I heard was a big difference, but I'm not really sure if it's the animation that's snappier or maybe it's the response of the game. All I know is that both allows you to move the character in exactly the same way, with W going up, S moving you backwards, A going left, D going right. It's the same exact thing for both games. Upon more research, I found out that Final Fantasy XIV is a refresh on the monitor for about 120 Hz, where World of Warcraft is going for 144 Hz. None of that really matters to me as long as it's not 3 frames per second on my screen. I don't really care what the refresh rate is, just let me kill a monster in peace, please. The questing, however, has me feeling exactly what other WoW players have been telling me throughout the years. That being, I feel no real connection with the people I help. I go up to an NPC, I talk with NPC, I skim through the wall of text and accept whatever they have for me, more or less just checking the reward instead of reading the world building that is somewhere in the short story. Do the quest, which usually has me fetching something, killing something, clicking something, or going to a place without a clear direction. I don't feel much of anything for anyone I help because I don't really think I did anything other than vanquishing their enemies. I think they could have taken care of themselves, or any other NPC that happens to be level 30. Even when you get to a point where the whole island of people come to celebrate your victory, I had no idea why they were here, and even though this important looking guy was standing here with a quest, thinking it would progress the story, I walked off and did the rest of the quest I spotted, not knowing that this guy would disappear when I had things done. Don't worry, I wasn't the only Draenei online, so he did eventually show up again so that I can actually finish the quest that apparently I just had to click on him for. Now, for the exception of these 2 NPCs who seemed important and were the ones who sent me out on my journey to investigate the island, and maybe this important looking old guy here, there wasn't much to remember when it came to the quest givers. Well, except Colin, who showed up at the celebration, dancing, you know, how he does to relieve the pain in his heart. The graphics, by the way, were fine. Cartoony and more jagged than Final Fantasy XIV, but were fine nonetheless. What throws me off sometimes are the design of some of the characters, like humans and their big hands and big feet thing going on, and it seems to trickle throughout the other races' design. Like, it made sense for the orcs and the Draenei, even though the male Draenei's arms look like they had a rare case of the Popeyes. I think the design of the world looks okay for a 2021 standard. Archaic in its design, but memorable and still holds up. So no, I don't have that much of a problem with the looks. I do think for a game coming from 2004, how they hide some of the loading is pretty clever, where what you think is a long flight is just them trying to load the whole map without you noticing, something that is very clever from the people who built this in early 2000s. The world itself is separated by loading areas, but the areas are freaking huge. I'd say some areas are as big, if not bigger, than what 14 has. Hi, Synchro from the future here, and I'm here to correct my past self. Now, when I said loading areas, I assumed that every pass on the map on the larger continent there was going to be a loading screen. I got this from my experience coming off the Draenei Island, which had a loading screen, but what I didn't really know is that this entire island, including the Night Elf starting area, is that it's just one continuous plot of land. So there is no loading screen unless there is a special event or you're going to a different island. It's just all one continuous plot of land. You can literally ride or run throughout the entirety of the continent, and it's kind of amazing. So yeah, sorry about that. Let's get back to the video. But the world design is perhaps a step above in 14, where in World of Warcraft, some locations look a little slapped together. Again, for a fantasy MMORPG, World of Warcraft has a wonderful aesthetic when it comes to world building, and to be fair, Final Fantasy XIV is younger with newer techniques used to bring out the creativity in its art style. Like being able to see far out locations you can go to in another area is just awesome in its design, like the Crystal Tower. And I know that WoW does the same thing, but I have not reached any area that does that as of yet, so I'm still looking forward to it. Even the 3 starting areas in 14 look great compared to WoW starting areas, but again, we're talking about a younger, smoother skinned looking teenager of an MMO being compared to a slightly wrinkled, uncle looking middle-aged adult of an MMO. Though I have to admit one thing, and I do hope nobody takes this the wrong way, but 14 just has a better looking set of gear. I mean, when someone can dress up as almost anything they set their mind to, 14 has by far the more superior dress-up system. We like to joke about something called a true endgame, where one tries to find the best glamour in Final Fantasy XIV, which in WoW terms, this would probably be called the transmog system. Weapons on both sides look cool, so I think neither one has an edge over the other, but I do think my Final Fantasy XIV character with his current glamour will always look better than what I could ever make this blue demon into. So, to finish this section off, I can plainly tell that Final Fantasy XIV took a lot from World of Warcraft, if not to be inspired, but to improve on what common MMOs use in terms of gameplay and mechanics, which is a good thing. Games should be inspired to be better than their competition. 14 1.0 was heavily inspired by 11, which had very archaic design and mechanics that did not help seep into modern gaming. It also didn't help that a potted plant had more design and polygons than a player's character. The mechanics they took from World of Warcraft and implemented into 2.0 was what brought people back and more, eventually stealing players from the very game they were inspired from. In fact, I think Yoshida and his team went and played WoW for months in order to get ideas and be inspired from that very MMO. And I don't know if this is true, but it is said that Yoshida actually went to BlizzCons. BlizzCons! Can you believe that? That's probably why FanFest exists. Now, let me just say this. You have a game that has changed over the past 17 years, but you have Final Fantasy XIV that hasn't even been online for at least a decade, at least the 2.0 version, and it still has better storytelling, even though it emphasizes on the showy actions your players can do. So please do not mind me when I start yawning on stream. It just means my adult ADHD mind is not being entertained enough. Mind you, WoW does hold my interest when I get rewarded for my endeavors, but I can clearly see why WoW vets who move over to Final Fantasy XIV, lovingly called WoW refugees in the Final Fantasy community, say they are impressed with the presentation of 14 when compared to WoW. Okay, how do I put this without being super biased and seemingly negative? Currently, as I stand right now in World of Warcraft, it does not compare to even A Realm Reborn's quality of music. I think there are reasons for that though. Now, WoW does not go all out with its music as much as Final Fantasy XIV does, and it's not like they don't have good music. Now, if I were to compare, I would say World of Warcraft is more akin to Conan the Barbarian or Lord of the Rings, where Final Fantasy is more Final Fantasy, has a little bit more rock and more fantasy in terms of its orchestra. But when I hear 14's music, I hear a plethora of genres mashed together to create a symphony of feel according to every situation I'm put into. But to say it was like this the whole time since A Realm Reborn would make me a liar. WoW is this thing where music will show up and play for a set amount of time before going silent, and major events isn't given much fanfare at my point of playing, but to be fair, I'm not very far, and I am excited to see where the music goes as I play through the expansion. But if what the WoW vets say to me, like it's a reminder or something, they say I shouldn't get my hopes up. Hi, Syncweaver from the future. Again, I guess I'm doing this a lot today, but I have to explain what I mean by the WoW vets telling me that I shouldn't get my hopes up. I think what they mean is that compared to the quantity and the quality of the music compared to WoW when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV, you're not going to see much variety in terms of genre, and you're not going to hear a lot of things that is outside the whole fantasy orchestra that is very familiar with World of Warcraft. I'm a huge fan of orchestral music, but I do like variety, which is the reason why I love Final Fantasy XIV's soundtrack, but I am still eager to see what I'm going to listen to as I get farther into World of Warcraft. Just to let you guys know, not saying that World of Warcraft's music is bad, that's very far. That's by far not what I think it is, but I just wanted to clear that up. But as a music and story inclined person, I kind of have to keep a little hope for myself, or else I may lose interest in World of Warcraft, and that is not what I want. I want to give WoW a fair shot. I want to see why people love this game, and I'm clearly seeing it, but if I get constant negative feedback from people who have gotten to the end game of WoW, then I fear it may steer me in the wrong direction as I take my journey around Azeroth. I'm in no way giving up on 14, but I think it's fair for me to at least check out the biggest competition. And if the music stays this ambient throughout my journey, I may need to play music in the background, not trying to offend in any kind of way. It's just, that is what WoW is trying to convey. The ambience of WoW's music is actually pretty great. It reminds me of the early years of 14, where it did the same thing in its starting area, music that came on and had a stop but conveyed the feelings of the area through its music. WoW's going for this soft tone kind of thing in the background while your mind is focused on the game and the music is supposed to set up the ambience. While roaming around on this red-dyed island, the music gave me a haunting, chilling feel, and also I need to do something here because it's very important. Whereas the Draenei starting point is filled with greenery, lush trees, and plants, it felt peaceful, and the music was telling me that. Again, I need more time and WoW to get a full scope. I mean, we're talking about a game that has this. Compared to the eventual this in WoW. Which I'm sure to hear in the future. Not to mention 14 has Nier music, so it's kind of unfair. So, what do I think of my first, technically second, technically third impression of World of Warcraft? Well, the story doesn't really show itself for the most part. It presents itself as something you can indulge in if you were to read the wall of text it throws at you when it comes to quest, so presentation of the game wasn't so high, but the combat is something that I'm really familiar with and something that I just quickly got into. It was pretty good, nothing really new and nothing really different compared to other MMOs, especially Final Fantasy XIV. And remember, 14 took much from World of Warcraft. This includes the combat, so I guess I'm fairly neutral, if not a bit positive, since it's something I've already experienced with. The graphics felt colorful, yet kind of jarring at the same time. I could see the limitations of the mobs and the character's design when looking closely, but its age is literally there to be seen. Being a game that did go through graphical overhaul since 2004, I will say that it does hold up well, and even combat had its flashy text for some of the skills you learn while leveling, so graphically, I think it's fine, even though I could tell the MMO's clearly from a different era. Mechanically, everything felt snappy and tight. Every action I took was immediate and the animation was quick and to the point, not wasting your time. Here, I felt it worked for what it was. A game more inclined with result rather than being flashy, even though a sword coming up from the ground is quite flashy. To keep it simple, I like the combat in WoW, and I like the combat in 14. I think WoW's is just a bit faster due to it being like a second ahead, but it doesn't really change anything for me since 14 has like an animation for everything you do, which kind of keeps your eyes busy. The quests worked as they should, as the mounts worked as they should, though getting from one place to another was actually quite time consuming. Flying from my starting island to this big old tree took a better half of 5 minutes to go through, and I know it's to hide the load time, but if I can transport from anywhere in 14 and only need a minute to get to wherever I need to go, like Amarant, then I think traveling could use some work in WoW, at least for the immediate transport kind of traveling, and I don't know if it gets better in the later expansions. Like, the spectacle view when flying is fine, but if I could just teleport, yeah, I would rather do that. But don't misunderstand, I know this is because it's an older game and computers back in the day were not that strong, so they needed something to help with the load time. But this is 2021. And I would think they would kind of fix this up at this point. And as I've said with its music, I have not seen all of it or its best, so that will have to stay inconclusive. And much of the game is yet to be explored, so as a final take, I will be continuing my journey around Azeroth for some time to come. I want to experience what others felt when they first played and why people keep coming back to it, even though they're all being abused by the figurative Big Daddy when it comes to Blizzard. With that being said, you guys can catch me here on Twitch, mostly on Tuesdays and Fridays around 5 PM Eastern Standard Time if you want to catch me being a total noob in a 17-year-old game. And also for Final Fantasy stuff too, cause you know, that's my thing. Anyway, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you very much. Don't forget to hit that sub button, the like button, the bell button, because it's the standard practice for every YouTuber to say that at least 2 or 3 times in their video. I do lore videos in Final Fantasy XIV. I do have a playlist if you want to check that out. Also, on Sundays, I participate in a podcast for Apartment 814. If you want to catch me on that, please come to Apartment 814 on Twitch and YouTube, and I'll see you guys then. Thank you very much, and stay vigilant.